So, welcome to our new podcast, a podcast brought to you by the Association of Concert Bands called It's a Band Thing. And I am delighted and very honored to be asked to co host this. But very importantly, we have the president of the Association of Concert Bands as the other co host for this show, Gail Brechting. Gail,
Hello,
uh,
good morning from Michigan. Yes, I'm excited about doing this podcast, something new for ACB, and certainly something that's going to be so much fun to do, especially with you, Keith. It's always fun to talk back and forth.
well, we're not strangers to podcasting together either, Gail.
No,
You're the regular guest on my other podcast, the Repertoire Happy Hour, which is part of the Global Band Room podcasts.
that's right.
And so we've actually got used to each other and got
We
used to
have.
working together. So I was delighted to be asked and very excited to host this new podcast with you. Gail, can you tell me a little bit about if anyone's uh, tuning into this for the first time
hmm
and they don't know much about the Association of Concert Bands. They've just seen this new podcast that's after being advertised. Can you tell me a little bit about the association and then uh, what this podcast is going to be doing? I know it's kind of tied into the ACB Connects program as well.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about the association.
Well, the Association of Concert Bands is over 40 years old. It was initially designed to help community bands in the United States, just to have community band conductors and musicians get together and talk about and be part of the same thing that we love to do. It's like what we do instead of doing sports. It's our thing. It's a band thing, just as exactly what we are. And but it's all for community bands, and a community band is made up of individuals that have played band instruments and choose to continue doing that in a group setting rather than just taking lessons and things like that. And it was started, as I said, over 40 years ago, and it has continued to get bigger and better and more for the individuals. One of the things that ACB has is a convention each year. Now, we haven't had one in 2 years because of all of the pandemic and all that has happened with that, but we do have one coming up, and we may talk about that a little bit later in May of next year in 2022, and it's out in New Mexico, which is very exciting. We haven't been out there. So that's going to be really fun. But it also helps people in bands because we have an ASCAP and BMI license for the United States bands, which you can do in a blanket license, much less expensive if you join ACB as part of that. It really helps you with being legal with everything you do and you're performing. So that's a big plus, and a lot of organizations belong to be able to have that license, which is really awesome. Another thing we have is a fantastic journal, which is a magazine that comes out quarterly. We have one coming up in October, another one in February, and another one in June. And that is another big reason that a lot of members join. Now, I'm going to jump back for a moment to the convention, because at the convention, it's not just going, they have a convention band. And usually there is a really great conductor that comes in and works, and all kinds of workshops and things like that. So that's another reason that people join ACB. Another thing is it's just got so many new things since the pandemic happened that are happening. We have what's called ACB Connects, ACB Conversations. These are a little bit different than a podcast because you actually see the people. It is something you come into, and it's more like watching a television show, I guess I would say, in comparison to a podcast, which would be more like listening to the radio. So we are continuing to add to ways to connect with people with our membership, and also it's out to the non-membership that hopefully would become a member perhaps. So ACB has some amazing things going on. One of the big conventions we attend is the one in Midwest Clinic, it's called, in Chicago around Christmas time. And again, we haven't had that one for a year, so we're hoping that it will happen this year. It's planned that it will be in person. And in fact, as a matter of fact, Keith, that's where I met you. Was at
Right.
at one of the Midwest conventions. Oh, how many years? Like five, perhaps.
Yeah, it's about
How
five
old
years
were your
ago.
kids? That's the way I
Much
always
younger.
figure it
Yeah.
out. And that's where we met. And because there's a big convention hall that allows people to go and meet new people, as well as go and attend clinics and watch bands perform and orchestras and all kinds of wonderful things. But ACB has been part of that because we believe that music is lifelong. Now, you got your education, K through 12, and college, military, professional bands, but ACB supports the community band, the people who didn't do all those things but play an instrument and want to continue, because life is, or music is, lifelong, and that's a really important part of ACB as well, to support that and have fun things happening throughout the United States and the world. Now we are international. We've been international for a number of years, and that's one of the big things in my presidency that I am really trying to grow, which is to be more international. So, and hence the reason I've gotten to know you, Keith, being from Ireland. It really helps us continue to grow in your connection. So that's just in a little bit of what ACB is. The goal is to help and support and share the beauty of community band music. So,
Well, I think one of the reasons that I'm so excited about being involved with the ACB and exploring the association and all of its bands through this podcast
uh-huh.
a little bit more is because I come from a country where the community band is banned. That's what it
Right.
is. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have
Yeah.
bands in schools. We don't have those big university marching bands or
Right.
big Texas band
Right.
programs
Yeah.
that the
Yeah. Yeah.
schools have.
It's a country all
You
into
know,
its own.
and we'll be talking about this a little bit later when we start talking about our own bands. But yeah, our bands are community bands, and children join the bands at the age of 8, and they can stay that in that band until they're 80. And we don't
Wow.
kick them out at 80 either. Like
Ah,
they can they can
right.
keep on playing with that band. But yeah, they're very much of the community. We teach them, we grow them, we nurture them, and
Right. Right.
that's a big part of our community, of our band system, is that it is part of that community. And so, I think a lot of the time when we see American bands coming to Ireland, which they often do for St.
Hmm.
Patrick's Day and for other events, and to other parts of the world, it's often the big high school or university marching bands that travel, because marching bands travel
Right.
well.
Mhm.
But we forget actually that there's such a big community band presence within the US as well, and that we have. I had the pleasure of being over and conducting your band a
Yes.
couple of years ago, and I remember meeting one of the saxophone players who said that she had been a hairdresser for 40 years,
Oh,
hadn't picked up
Gwen. Hmm.
the instrument since she had been in high school, and then just came back to it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the importance of
Yes.
community band, I think.
Yes. Yes.
And I love that the ACB really focuses on that musician,
Right.
rather than just the band directors.
Right.
We have enough people focusing on us all
That's
the
right.
time,
All the time.
Gail.
That's right. Absolutely. And that is the focus of ACB. Not only that it's band people, but it's the individual members that we want to try to give them something to better themselves or to be excited about and belong to. All of these kinds of things. So, yeah, that's what ACB is about. And I know that there's community bands in many countries throughout the world, and that's another place that if we can help them in any way, whatever that may be, if it's just to be friends virtually is a great way to do it. I mean, some of the things that have happened between you and me or between you and some other people in other countries is what we have already done just virtually in the past 18 months has raised the level of community bands because we can't perform too much right now. I mean, it's starting to come back, but with that in mind, it kept it alive. One of the things I noticed, I had rehearsal last night with my band, and I have to split my band up into two bands right now to be able to safely put them spread apart and all of that. And one of the things that many members came up afterwards and just said, it feels like we're actually in our group, 2 years ago. I'm starting to feel like we're rehearsing. We're not just playing through stuff or getting outside and playing, a concert of what I call, pop music and fluff music. That's all fun and good, and the audience loves it. But the musician really needs to get in and dig and get better. And that's something they're starting to do now. But my point on all that is you and people who are doing things like this are really helping community music stay alive, let alone you know uh, get better. It is some of them, they just are so glad that we're actually doing it again, coming back to being a musician. So that's important too. Thank you for all you've done with your virtual. It's amazing, truly amazing.
Well, I think the last year and a half or so has been a great sort of opportunity to look at associations like the
Hmm.
ACB and see the importance of them, and see the importance of that sharing of ideas.
right.
You spoke to some of the benefits of joining the ACB, the convention, and the journal. Um, and I think one of the unsaid benefits that we get from a lot of these associations, be it the ACB or
Mhm,
be it a number of the other associations around the world for bands or other things
mhm.
like sports, is just that camaraderie, that opportunity to meet
Yeah,
others that share that same passion and
right.
share the same values and goals. And you mentioned meeting each other back in at Midwest. Midwest is one of the
Yeah.
best
Oh,
opportunities for that. And and
it's
and again, it's a lot of the band directors get to see that a lot of the time and get to go to Midwest, and the
right.
musicians don't. But the musicians have ACB, I
That's
think,
right.
and
Yes, yes.
I think
Good point. That's a very good point.
a huge part of what the association does. I
Right.
think that probably doesn't get the credit that it deserves sometimes.
It maybe not, but it certainly has grown in the 20 years that I've been involved with ACB. I was thinking about when I joined, and compare it from that to what it is today, it's continuing to evolve as it needs to, and that's really important. And I think that's the one thing that is exploding right now virtually. We have a new Instagram. We have all these ACB connects. We have conversations. I just did a beautiful conversation, and everything is on our website for people to go back to. We keep all of that on. So I did one with Johan de Mai, all about his wonderful works that he's done, and how exciting that was. And it's all, you can see it, and he's got tons of things he put up on the screen to understand more about his wonderful works that he's done, as well as done some things with some military conductors and how they've gotten through this with the military. It's as a band, and it just helps you feel like you want to stick with it. It's so easy to say, well, okay, we can't do it. I'm going to give up. Band's done. Unfortunately, I had a band because I'm president. I know some things that had to dissolve for a couple reasons, and I know there's more than one. But they also, when you talk to these people, they are, it's just for now. We're going to be back. It's just too important. And Keith, you understand that. If you're a musician, it's kind of in your soul. You really can't get rid of it, even if you want to sometimes. But, and I say that very jokingly because my whole career has been a wonderful path that I've been on. And sometimes I couldn't believe, I remember the first couple times I got my checks being a teacher, a music band director, I would go, wow, and I get paid too. I mean, you do what you love, and you also get paid. Of course, that all goes to all my bills. Bam, it's gone. But still, it's really nice to be on that path rather than having to work. But so,
Well, I think for anyone that's listening to this podcast for the first time, well, I'm hoping that they are because this is our first episode.
exactly.
um, we are going to be interviewing a number of guests over the coming months. So myself and Gail will be interviewing composers, conductors, but also some of these musicians that we talk about,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
people that are involved in their community bands and helping their bands to grow and prosper. And
Right.
just talking about all of those interesting stories we have around this band world. It's a band
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, it is. It is a
Um,
band thing. You have to be it to understand it. Different
but
language.
today I thought that maybe the best way to start would be to get to know each other. We
Yeah.
already know each other, but maybe some of our guests
Yeah.
don't.
Right.
And I thought a really good place to start will be talking a little bit about our careers and
Right.
where we've come from.
Hmm.
We both just didn't land in the ACB. We kind of had a journey to get there.
Yes.
So, Gail, tell me about your journey and your career in music.
Okay, well, it started many years. No, just kidding. I'm not going to go all the way back there. Um, I grew up in a family that was fairly musical, but not professionally by any means. Just happy people, people that sang in the car all the time. People that had been in band. My father had been in band, and so it was something that they had hoped that some of their kids might do, and I was the one that kind of did. And as I look back on that, I'm sure many of you listening will look back on why you became a musician. It's a very interesting thing. And mine was, I really think that I was destined that I didn't know I was, because I could pick up music in regards to just hearing something. Now, I couldn't just figure it out like some people can do, but I had a strong interest in it. And my parents kind of saw that. So went to college, became a band director, taught all kinds of music, but primarily in the public school system here in the United States. My degree is in instrumental music, and then I have a minor in vocal music, so I could teach any of the musics. Most of what I did was beginning band. I started students on band instruments is what I did. I did a little bit of vocal, but not much in regards to teaching choir like we have here in the United States. But I did a lot of elementary music as well, which means children K through usually 6 or 8 have to take music somehow every day or every week in our regular school classes, and then they can pick up band or orchestra or choir, art, whatever the arts are. So I did all of that, and I did that for 40 years, which sometimes I can't believe it, but I did, and I didn't stop. I started and teaching, and I went from 1979 to 2019, and I did 40 years of music education, which has really helped in the community band world. I think that's really important because I think people who've had to teach really understand and can help the community musician. Because sometimes I do a lot of teaching, not intentional teaching, like, oh, you can't figure that out, but I you just naturally do. It's very exciting, and I think it's helped build my program a lot because of that, and your connections. I retired in 2019. Way back when we have one child, and when she was a little girl, ACB came to me and said, "We'd like you to run for president." And my husband and I both said, "No." And Keith, it's busy when your children are little, and when they get into high schools, you have to be there as a parent, or you should be there as a parent. So finally, it came around, and I was getting ready to retire, and then I got a hold of ACB. I have been on the board on and off a number of times, and done many things with ACB, but decided then that it was an important thing to offer what I had to ACBs as an organization. So I said I was ready to run for president, and fortunately, I was able to be nominated and then voted in, and it's very super exciting to be at the helm of this amazing organization and getting the chance to work with so many incredible people. So that's been kind of my career. I'm a trombone player, which a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, you're kidding, you're a girl," but I do, and I love it. My husband and I play in a semi-professional jazz band. We got a gig tonight actually with dancers, and so yeah, and I sing a lot. I do a great deal of vocal stuff around my community. That's a really exciting thing too. So it's just been kind of my path, and I've loved every moment of it and had the opportunity to do a lot of really fun things because of it. What about you, Keith? I know that you started in military, is that right? Or you started as a child, I think, right? First, and then went up from there.
Yeah, it's been a path with lots of twists and turns, as you know, Gail.
I do.
But yeah, I started off in a band here in Ireland that's quite famous here in Ireland. Actually, if the average Joe Soap was asked to name an Irish marching band, they'd name the Artane Boys Band,
Okay.
and it was a marching band on the north side of Dublin, and very military style band,
Okay.
And the reason people knew us was because we played at all of the Gaelic Athletic Association matches. It's like the NCAA,
Oh,
all of this like Gaelic football and hurling
wow.
and so on. So we'd play in this big national stadium, about 80,000 people, and we'd be there every week and on TV and so on. So
Wow.
it was a very prestigious, and it just happened to be that I grew up in the area that band was based.
On
But
your
my
path.
granny, it was just
Yeah.
it was meant to be. My grandmother was a singer. With what we called in Ireland, they were called show bands, but they're not like marching show bands. Like
Yeah, sure, sure.
they were jazz bands, but they were very big in the 50s and 60s
Oh,
here in
sure.
Ireland and the UK. They were kind of like a little bit of Cliff Richard, a little bit of the Beatles, a little bit of jazz.
Mhm,
Um, and
mhm.
they were very popular. My grandmother was a singer with
Oh,
those bands,
I did
and
not know that. That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah. And so when she brought me up to join the band, I wanted to be a trumpet player, and she just had a love of the clarinet, and she told me no, she was going to make me play clarinet,
No,
and,
you are not.
and, and my life was decided at that moment.
But that makes me feel a lot better because I've had a hard time putting your personality with clarinet, and I know you're a fine clarinetist, but now it makes so much more sense that you're a trumpet player. Okay, I feel so much better now knowing this.
well, I think what makes sense is that as soon as I could, I took up saxophone as well, and I think that makes probably a little bit more sense for my personality a bit. But it's like the woodwind player that wants to be a brass player.
There you go.
But yeah, so I spent years. I mean, that band. looking back on it now, it's interesting to do so. That was 5 days a week, 2 hours a day
Wow.
of a commitment after school, and it was right beside my secondary school, my high school. So I would go to school until five past four, and then I would walk over to the band room and I would do my homework on one of the tables in there. It was like the boardroom table in the band room,
Okay.
and then I go into rehearsal. So I just lived in the band room
Yeah.
after school every day. It's kind of like Phantom in the Opera sort of thing, you know. And so years later, I was 18, 19 years of age. Things hadn't been easy during my teenage years, and I ended up having to do a lot of work while I was in school as well. So by the time I got to college age, I really hadn't. I had already kind of put myself through secondary school, and
Right.
I hadn't got the energy to go and try and do that for another
Mhm.
4 years in college.
Yeah, it's a
And the
lot.
opportunity to join the army came up and be in the army band,
Perfect.
and that seemed like the best solution, and it probably was. I mean, I often regret not going to college and studying music. It has limited me in some
Oh,
ways in certain options that I've had in my career, but looking back at 17, 18-year-old Keith,
yeah.
and the options that he had at the time,
Mhm.
I don't blame him for making those decisions. And the army band was incredibly good to me. I was 12 years in the army,
Oh,
and it was a great career. I got to practice and go to the gym and travel the country and the
yeah.
world as well. I got to go to Belgium, France, Germany, Italy.
Wow.
So it was a really good job, and I did think for a long time that was it. That was going to be my career, and I'd
Right.
be there for until I retired. But an opportunity came up when I was around 32 years of age to go back and become the general manager for the Artane band. It had
Oh,
accepted girls in by that stage, so it wasn't the Artane
yeah.
boys band anymore.
Yeah.
And I went back and became the manager of that, and that's when I met you, Gail.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I don't know
So I was
how long had you been teaching before that happened, do you think? I mean, working as the in Artane again.
so teaching was an interesting sort of part of my career. You see, as I mentioned earlier on, community bands here are responsible for all of the teaching of young
Mhm,
people.
mhm,
So being a band director or a band teacher really isn't a full-time gig here. There is
mhm.
none. The only full-time roles in that sort of job were in Artane, and that was because it was
Okay,
such a famous big band. So
right.
um, so I was in the army, and in the evenings I was teaching a band that we started. We started it with five little tin
Oh.
whistle players, and it ended up growing into a nice big size 70-piece concert band over the
Wow.
course of about 10 years. And that was my first teaching gig. I started that when I was 20,
Mhm.
and I
Wow.
figured it out as I went. So as the kids were growing, I was figuring out how to actually conduct a
Wow,
band or teach a band.
self-taught. I mean, that's fantastic.
So
Yeah.
self-taught and also guided a
Oh,
lot by colleagues and by
sure,
friends that were
sure.
other
So you have an
great.
education for sure. I mean, you don't have the paper to say it, but you certainly, I mean, I've watched you conduct and I've watched you work. You are a very experienced teacher. There's no two ways. Yeah,
Well,
about that.
it was certainly trial by error,
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
and
Well, even when you're trained, it is too, let me tell you.
but I tell you, it became such a passion of mine that when I was presented with this opportunity of staying in the army, which was this incredibly safe job and
Mhm.
beautiful job. I mean, you get to
Yeah.
exercise and practice music every day. It's fantastic.
It is.
Um, but teaching was such a passion of mine, and I had this opportunity to have one of those few full-time positions doing
Mhm.
this in
Right.
the country. And so I left the army. And the thing about the army band is, once you, in Ireland at least, once you leave you can't join again. So it was a big
Uh,
decision.
mhm.
It
Yeah.
was a really big decision.
Yes.
So anyway, went off and was managing Artane. We brought the Artane band. It was absolutely beautiful to be able to have my board meetings at the table that I had done my homework on
Oh,
as
that's
well.
so sweet. Yes, cool.
Um,
Absolutely.
so managed that band for about 4 years, and we built a new choir program there, and we set up a lot of partnerships with Drum Corps International and Notre Dame University and so on,
Wow.
and eventually got the opportunity to as much as it was a full-time job, but it was still all evening work because that's when the
Right.
kids were coming to band, of course.
Sure.
And I have young kids, and
Mhm.
to be missing the young kids
Yeah.
to be missing my kids every day was hard. So
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to move to my sponsor, which was Celtic Horizon Tours.
Right.
So this tour company was sponsoring a lot of the band's work, and we were hosting a lot of bands that would come into Ireland.
I see.
So our band room was right beside Dublin Airport. So either bands on their way in or way out of Ireland would come and visit us and do
Oh,
concerts,
that's so cool.
and I loved it. I loved
Yes.
meeting all of
Yeah.
these bands. So,
Oh,
and I got to
yes.
travel to Midwest with Celtic Horizon Tours a few
Right.
times as the person that they sponsored. So, an opportunity came up to go work there, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Right.
I've been working in music travel and bringing bands to Ireland for St Patrick's Day and for
Hmm.
tours around Scotland and UK and
Yeah.
Ireland and setting up concerts for them. And then the great flip side of that is that I get to go to the US a lot and meet with these
Hmm.
bands and get to
Yes.
conduct and
Absolutely, absolutely, and one of the things that we've discussed over the years, that we've known each other is Ireland's a great first or second time travel, away from the United States. Take away all the pandemic issues for a while here, because the language barrier is very, very slim, and it's a fun place to go. And many people in the United States, and band people, have some kind of Irish heritage. I think there's, the Irish people came to America, and as we all know, and I think there's a lot of people who just, and it's such a beautiful island. It's such a beautiful place to go and see. So, that part of it, I can see why you got so hooked into that. But I will say, with my background, Keith, I'm going to say this. I don't know if I've ever said this to you before. I think you are one of the most well-rounded musician, educator, person who tries to help community music that anyone I know here in the United States, even because of all the things you just said. I mean, I think that's something you should think of as an advantage rather than a disadvantage, that you didn't have the education part. Yes, there's a lot of security in that, and American bands are what they are because we've had school bands. But what you have and what you have done in the past, few years that I've known you, even, which is maybe 5, is incredible to me. I don't know anyone that has affected the world of community music as much as you have. So I think your path has brought you where it needs to be right now. It's
no, I
sometimes
really appreciate that,
that's
and I
very
guess
true.
when I'm able to sit back and reflect a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I do see everything that I've done as kind of helped to kind of strengthen,
Absolutely. It's
and
true.
I've learned from a lot of no matter what it is that I've done, I've been able to
Hmm.
learn something from it. I think,
Hmm.
but along the path, those hurdles seem huge at
Oh,
the time,
yes.
and
Yes.
they can be quite
Oh, yes.
they can be quite hard to
Yeah.
get over some of
Absolutely.
those hurdles. But most of the time, it is just in my own mind or in our own
Sure,
minds,
sure. But you're a
Um,
risk taker, and I think that's an important thing to have a little bit of in everyone, is to have a little bit of risk taking. I mean, it's a calculated risk, of course, but there's times where some people, I mean, I, what I did was almost like being a factory job in some ways. But I knew it was safe. I did it, and bump, 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 bump. And I've lived in the same community for over 35 years. So in many ways, living in the same community has been a joy now that I've retired out of that, because every day, I'm not kidding, every day I bump into someone that I had in one of my classes somehow, because I taught K-12. And that in itself is lovely also, to think how cool is that. However, there's times when I wish I had risked a little more and maybe tried for a doctorate position somewhere, to get my degree. And we all can look back and go, why didn't I do that? However, if you look back and go, wow, look what I did, that is an incredible, thing to do. And I really encourage you to do that, because you're an incredible musician that way.
well, knowing you, Gail, as well as I do now at this stage, I wouldn't be surprised to hear at some stage, maybe when your presidency finishes, that you do start that doctorate.
I'm
I mean,
looking at it.
I wouldn't be in the slightest bit surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of people that have done so much, I mean, I've
Mm,
never, I've and this for our listeners, this won't be every week where we
yeah.
just compliment each other for an entire podcast. But if you don't know Gail already,
Mm.
Gail is one of the most energetic, driven people in the band world that I've come across,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I know that the Association of Concert Bands and the board and the bands that know you
Hmm.
know how much and how lucky they are to have you
Well, thank you.
as in that leadership position, and I've seen that firsthand. So
Well, thank you.
it's great to be able to learn from you as well, Gail.
Well,
So
thank you. It's been fun to be the
so.
president because I get to try things. I get to say, hey, and I would never try something that I didn't research or anything like that. But we've done a lot of things in the past, what, 6 months that I've been president. So it's pretty exciting.
It's not what you expected your presidency to be initially, I'm sure.
Oh
This
no,
wasn't to be foreseen.
no! Like 3 or 4 years ago, when I said, yeah, I will put my hat in the ring, there was nothing out there that became what it is today. I'm really the transitional president in so many ways, moving
Mm.
us into virtual, moving us into the next century, really, in a lot of ways. Yeah. But it's fun. I'm having a good time doing it.
Well, let me ask you about your band then, because we're both still active
Hmm.
conductors, but we
Hmm.
haven't really talked a huge amount about that because we knew that we would be now. Tell me a little bit about your band. Of course, I've been over there. I've had the privilege
Hmm.
of being able to conduct them, and they're a wonderful band. But tell me a
Thank
little bit
you.
about them.
Okay, they are called the West Michigan because we live on the west coast of Michigan. West Michigan Concert Winds. We are a wind band. We have woodwinds and brass and percussion. And they are 43 years old. It's our 43rd season, which is not old compared to Europe, but it's quite old for American bands. We have a number of American bands that are over 100 years old, but they've been mostly on the East Coast. The winds were started for community musicians so that people could play their instruments. We've been very blessed in Michigan to have fantastic school bands, fantastic university bands, and I do believe the history of that makes a difference in each state. In the United States, there are some states that have just very few bands because they don't have the school. Well, they have school bands, but they don't have university bands that a lot of these students would perhaps go into. They might leave their state to go to a different one. But I have found that the reason we have such strength is probably back in the 30s and 40s and 50s that people who were at our universities really strive to get into the high schools in regards to getting those students to come to their university. So what that did is created this incredible network of strong high school bands. And in this area where I live, there were many that were at the level of going to Midwest to perform. So, I mean, for those of you who understand
Wow.
that, that's the kind of level of bands we had around here. So that it's generationally, like you have, Keith, in your country, continued because if the parent loved it, they wanted their children to have it, and so on and so on and so on. So I still have people that will go back and say, "Well, my grandmother played in this band and it went there," or vice versa. I mean, that kind of stuff. And so the bands have been very strong, and we have a lot of that, which created really strong community bands. And there's probably in my area right here, I'd say within 50 miles or maybe 70 miles, there are at least 6 or 7 community bands just in that, and they're all different varieties of bands. Mine, I can honestly and proudly say is one of the better ones. It's one of the stronger ones that you have to audition to get into. We do have a fee, a playing fee for $60. It's like $20 a concert or something. My band has a season where we usually do 3 to 4 concerts indoors in a beautiful theater. And then we do maybe anywhere between 2 to 6 summer concerts outdoors. So I push hard. I'm always got a carrot out there to make them better, to travel. Like we were supposed to go to Ireland and Scotland in 2020. And of course, that didn't happen. And we're still got our fingers crossed for certain possibilities. We do travel a lot. This band has just the people in it just love to travel. So I have people from other bands that come to mine to travel because their bands just don't want to do that. So that's really fun too. But we rehearse at a community college, and we have a great marriage contract with them where students can come in and play in my band and take it for credit, like an arts credit. That has worked beautifully, and I encourage other bands to do that because it's a good way to really get rooted in your
Mm.
community. So the West Michigan Concert Winds, we've done some really amazing things. We've traveled, as I said, probably 4 or 5 times abroad. We've played in Carnegie Hall. There is a wonderful program where when the halls, these beautiful big halls in America are dark, meaning that there's no one playing in them, like on Sunday evenings or during the week, they have programs where you can get into them. And so we did. But even though the theater wasn't, filled with other kind of performers, we had a big audience because it's a program, and it was just an incredible bucket list thing for almost all of my musicians to be able to play in Carnegie Hall in New York City is the epitome, really, of in our world of what music is about. We also got to play in Chicago's beautiful Symphony Hall, which in the Midwest is Carnegie Hall. It is an
Yeah.
incredible place to play, and so we've had some. I've been fortunate to be able to do many wonderful things with my band and give. I sometimes step back and say, "This is an opportunity I'm giving to my musicians. Yeah, they have to pay for it. Yeah, they have to work hard, but they get to do it." And just opening up that opportunity is something that I feel is a big part of my job with the West Michigan Concert Winds. So we call ourselves the Winds. It's just a fast way to say it, so it doesn't have to be such a long title. But it's been wonderful. I've been with him as a conductor for 25 years, and I'm the third conductor. So the band's been around a
Wow.
while. Yeah. So what about
How,
your band, Keith? Oh, you got some questions?
well, I just wondering how big is the band?
Ah,
What sort of numbers do you have, and is it an annual commitment? How do you keep that commitment going with the band as
it's a
well?
good, really great questions. Um, First of all, when I first took the band, I think there were maybe 55 or 60. And now on our roster, I think we have 90. Now, we don't perform with 90 ever because people are here, there, and everywhere. And, a lot of my people go south in the winter and things like that. But I normally perform with a band of at least 70 almost all the time. And so that is something that we do. As I said, it is an auditioned band. I usually let people sit in for 2 rehearsals to kind of check us out, and we check them out a little bit. And then if they're still serious and still want to do it, then I have them do an audition, and it's simple. It's an audition of they play something of their own, something from an etude or a solo, and then I have them sight read and I have them do chromatic scale highest to lowest, so I can see their range a little bit. And we talk a lot in my audition. It's just getting to know them a little bit, and then just places them in the section. And I can say after 25 years, I think there's only twice that I've ever said, you might not be ready for this group yet. And I help them find another band, and then if they really want to, they'll come and find their way back, and a couple of them
Hmm.
have. But I am all about inclusion and not exclusion if I can do that for my people. So yeah, that's
And
what I
and how and to just to my last question, like how do you keep commitment? Because obviously, like with community band, that's a challenge that probably schools don't face as much now. I know school directors are
Mhm.
probably saying, "Oh, we have to keep the kids
Ah,
in the program."
yeah.
Of course, I
Yes.
get
Yes.
that, but there's an added complication with adults,
Right.
though, of course, and this is
Mhm.
something that they have to do after work, and people have kids, and
I
people have
know. I know.
jobs, and how do you
Well,
keep commitment in the band?
Well, first, I'm going to answer to having couples in my band, like husband and wives with children. I will allow, like, I've got a lovely young couple with a little gal, a little baby girl, and so one comes one week, one comes the next week, and then they make the commitment to be at the rehearsal before the dress as well as to the concert, and that has worked so well with so many couples that I'm not afraid because they work hard. I mean,
Well,
they you could tell they practice. When I started not giving a break in my rehearsals. Um, and I'm not going to talk pandemic rehearsals because that's whole nother animal. But the old times, I would never give it. The conductor ahead of me would give a break halfway through, like the 2.5 hours. I stopped doing that when we started going into big halls because if you needed to get up and use the restroom or whatever, you go out and do it, come back. That's what I did. The difference by not letting them have that break, and I'm not that much of a mean task driver, but what it did was it kept the intent of focus. And all of a sudden, the music that I was giving them just rose up and rose up. And I think when you, as a conductor, I mean, I judge also a lot, and I can almost tell by the way the conductor walks in with that band whether that band's going to play well because of the way they carry themselves, the way they work with their kids, all of that. And I think, as you know, whoever's on the podium is mirrored by the people that are sitting out there to play in the ensemble. And if my expectations are super high, and I don't intentionally do that, it's just I think who I am. They want that badly. They want to please me, whether I like that or not. And so there's a rapport there between all of us.
How long are your rehearsals, Gail? I want to know
Well,
how long you're not giving them a break for.
7 hours. No, we go from we go from 7 o'clock till 9:30 in the real world.
What?
Yeah, yep, and, yeah, and my expectation is, that they do that, and I have had they'll complain, but they do it with a smile on their face, it's that expectation that they are like, "We can do this." It's not been an issue really at all since I've done it, and I've been doing this for Probably 10 years of my 25. Yeah.
During the pandemic, Bands of Ireland, one of the organisation I'm involved in here, we had a temporary podcast. Myself and Barbara Dowling,
Oh yeah.
Barbara.
Yeah.
We ran that, and one of the questions we asked all of the bands was, "Do you have a tea break?" In
Uh-huh.
Ireland, you know what? If you have a rehearsal that lasts over an hour, there has to be a tea break.
Well, I will
And
say,
fail,
go ahead.
without fail, all of the bands in Northern Ireland, all of the brass bands, none of them had a break.
Ah, yeah. See, there you
And all
go.
the bands in the Republic of Ireland, they all had a tea break with biscuits
Mhm.
and cakes and,
Yes, of course. Yes, yes. Well, we used to do that, but it just seemed that it didn't ever, we just never got down to the nitty-gritty, you know?
yeah.
And part of it was a lot of and I'm just going to say this, part of it was I taught a lot of elementary band kids how to play instruments and stuff. So when I got to the winds, I was like ready to be university level. I'm ready. You guys are all adults. You are telling me that you play well enough to be in this, so let's go, put your money where your mouth is kind of thing. And they have. And they will be the first, I think, to turn around and say she's right, whether they want to
Yeah.
admit that or not. I just did it because one, I'm an efficient conductor, and I will give 1,000% to you. Please give me back at least 100. That kind of a thing. So
Hmm.
it's been a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I will say, you asked me this. I always put something out every year. I always tell them, this is my goal for you this year, and it's usually higher than they think they can achieve, and then in fact they do. Because they want it badly too. I remember when I started not having that break, people would come up to me and say, "The music you're giving us is hard." And I said, "Well, I know you can play it." And they would say, I've never practiced before since I've been in this band, but now I have to." And, that's really, really cool too. And remind me to talk to you a little bit about something else we're doing now. Um, we're doing live streaming on Facebook, because so many of them in the pandemic, if they feel like they don't feel good, they sometimes will say, "I can't come to rehearsal." So we started just 2 weeks ago. We started doing a live stream of a rehearsal. Rehearsals are different right now, timing wise. Now they either come to 1.5 hour rehearsal, either at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So it's longer for me. I rehearse almost 4 hours, but they
Well,
come for an hour and a half. But the live streaming last night, I had 2 or 3 people watch it because they were home. One was on vacation, and so she got her instrument out and was playing along with it too. So we're finding ways. At first, I was afraid to try that because I'm like, well, everybody's just going to stay home, but that didn't happen. They want to be there. That they want to be there.
well,
So
I mean, with live streams, I'll be able to join in those rehearsals myself.
yes, 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 and I can get you the music, and it would be great. I'd love it. But then you got to come over and play I need a first clarinet, Keith. So you better just, if you're really going to do this. No, just kidding.
I got to start practicing again if that's the case.
Okay, man, we're doing procession of nobles, so you better get your fingers moving. So let's talk about your band, because I've been at your school and seen. I haven't had the opportunity to see your band other than the people of it, but tell me about your band.
Yeah, so I live on the west coast of Ireland, so in County Galway. I actually technically live in County Roscommon, which I know there's a Roscommon in Michigan,
Yes,
but the band itself is just across the river, and it's in Galway.
right.
So the band itself is it's quite an old band. It's 143 years old this year.
You're 100 years
So
older than my band. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, it's a pretty old band, and it was like a lot of the bands in Ireland. It was the original name for the band was the Ballinasloe Temperance Band,
Oh,
which I mean, if you really think through that logic at the time, was that we were going to put musicians together, give them instruments and weekly rehearsals as a
mhm.
way to keep them away from alcohol.
There you
I don't
go.
think that's I don't think that's ever worked in the history of bands or
In
musicians.
Ireland, that's funny.
Um, but yeah, that's so it's 143 years old. Having said that, it over those 143 years has had ups and downs, and there's been times where the band just wasn't ceased to exist altogether for a number of years. Around 7 or 8 years ago, it was the band had prospered a lot during the 70s and 80s and early 90s as well. In fact, one of our alumni from that early 90s is a woman called Emer Noon, and Emer is one of she's the first woman to conduct at the Oscars a number of years ago, and
Right.
she's a composer of video game music and movie music, and yeah, for anyone that doesn't know Emer Noon, it's certainly worth googling who she is. And
Hmm.
I'll mention Emer again now in a few moments because she's a huge advocate for the band. So she was part of the band in that successful band in the 90s. But as bands tend to do, they have their ups and downs, and the band ceased to exist for quite some time. I mean, the musicians would come together at times, but just as a regularly rehearsing large, full instrumentation band, it didn't.
Right.
And about 7 or 8 years ago, the committee founded the band again, and uh, they got a lot of the old players back. They found instruments in attics, and they
Oh,
found a place to rehearse, and so on. But they weren't really bringing in a huge amount of young people. They were bringing in. Like a lot of bands here in Ireland do, as kids would come up to the band, or even adult beginners would come up to the band and say, "Can I join?" They'd
hmm.
just give them an instrument and sit them down beside them and
Yes.
teach them during
Yeah.
the rehearsal.
That's
Just
fabulous.
sort of taking people in as they arrive at the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to a point, we still kind of have that sort of
Hmm.
mentality. We don't ever turn anyone away. But around the time that I finished up with Artane and started working in travel, I was asked to go over and do some workshopping with them in terms of developing a strategic plan and child protection policy and applying for funding and so on, because that had been my job,
Right.
with Artane. And I just mentioned to them, if any band was going to sort of, if my own kids were going to be part of any band,
Hmm.
this would be the band. So I'd love to help them out a little bit more,
Right.
if I could. And through long talks, we ended up starting a youth band. We aimed to get 20 kids into that youth band, and we got over 60 in that
Wow.
first year, which is a
Tripled.
small town. There's only about 8,000 people living in Ballinasloe. It's not a big
Right.
town. It's a rural
Wow.
Irish
That's
town.
fabulous.
Um, and yeah, so we recruited well, and we've kept a lot of those kids. The retention has been very high. And then very recently, because of the pandemic, and because the adults themselves hadn't played together for such a long time, their level of musicianship
Hmm.
it wasn't so much beyond where the
Right.
kids were really.
Right.
So what we've done is we've amalgamated it all into one band now, and then we will have
Good.
beginners coming in again this year as well. But we've amalgamated all the kids and the adults into one band.
Wonderful.
And I've been asked to take on the role of conducting that entire
Oh,
band then as well. So
fabulous.
we're
Oh,
back in rehearsals on September 20th. I don't know when this podcast will be coming out. Hopefully it'll be soon after that. But our
right.
first rehearsal in about 18 months
Ooh,
is
Monday.
on September 20th. We've been doing a lot of online lessons, and with the kids especially, and we've kept busy over the last 18 months. But first in person rehearsal is September 20th. And the big news, and you were there when you were here in Ballinasloe, is
Yeah.
that first rehearsal is in our new band room as
No,
well.
how
Yeah,
wonderful. How
yeah.
it's such a
So
great building.
it's a beautiful little building.
Mhm.
It's the old parochial hall for the Church of Ireland church here
Right.
in Ballinasloe. So it's an old building. It's about as old as the band. It's about
Oh
150
my
years old, which is
goodness.
lovely.
Yes.
And it's big limestone walls, and
Yes.
it's on the protected list, so that gives us extra work to try and have to look after all
Yes.
of that.
Yes. Right.
All of our fundraising has gone into the roof and rather
Yeah.
than the instruments
I remember
lately.
that. Mm, so sad.
So, but it's fantastic. I mean, so many bands around Ireland, and I'm sure it's probably the same in many places in the States as well, don't have places to rehearse right now because of COVID, and
Right.
their homes that they did have previously
Mhm.
won't allow them to
Right.
rehearse anymore and so on. We haven't got that problem because we've got our own home now, and
So
so
wonderful.
huge credit goes to
Mhm.
all of the committee for making that happen. It's been an incredible amount of work, and we were up there last week with
Oh.
sweeping brushes and cloths and just cleaning up the whole place and trying to get it ready to move
Excellent.
in. It's still not finished. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's a lot closer than it was. Maybe new
Sure.
ceiling on it and so on. So looking forward to being able to rehearse in there.
Oh, it's great.
In terms of numbers, we've probably got around. It's hard to know actually. I'm not
Mhm.
really going to know that
Yeah.
until
Right.
the next couple of weeks, and we see what adults come back,
Right.
see what kids come back. I think we have a band of around 50. I think, which for a
Fabulous.
small town is
That's
really healthy.
incredible.
Yeah.
Really great
And
video.
then we're starting a new beginner class.
Mhm.
That's going to be a small group. There's probably going to be about 7 or 8 kids in it.
Oh.
But Emer's sending her son there.
Oh,
Emer Noon, and so to just to her, to show how much of an advocate she is for the band. She's
mhm.
not just out there giving us testimonials or
Right,
making donations.
right.
She believes in the band so much and
Yes,
believes in that rural community
right.
band that
Mhm.
she's signing her own kids up to that
That's
band. They
fantastic.
live in LA for 6 months and they live in Ballinasloe for 6 months. Her
Yeah.
husband is one of the biggest, is a huge producer of
Oh,
shows and
okay.
and albums and so on.
Sure.
And so when they're here in Ballinasloe, he's gonna be joining the band here as well. So
That's
that's lovely.
fantastic.
Yeah,
It is, and it's gonna help that band for sure in other
yeah.
ways. But I'm so glad I had the opportunity, just for those of you listening, my husband and I were able to go over in January of 2020 before the pandemic really hit and locked us all down in the world, and got to see this building. So hopefully, Keith, when we come back in the next 2 or 3 years, whenever that is, I can't wait. I hope we get a chance to see your town band and things like that again, because I know it's better, bigger and better, the building, and it's the picture I have in my head. I can't wait to see what it is when we come back in a few years.
Well, this I certainly, because of the nature of my job and working with so many directors and,
Hmm.
and people that work with bands. If anyone's listening and they would like to pop in and say hello to the Ballinasloe Town Band when they're here in
Yeah,
Ireland, absolutely, the door is
yeah,
always open to band people around
that's
the world.
fabulous. It's such a darling
Um,
town too. Those of you who, if you get to do it, because it's well worth seeing this beautiful town.
Yeah, it's a pretty town. It's, as I say, it's on the west coast of Ireland, so it's one of those towns that you're going to be around if you're going to Galway at all, or going to Clifton or Connemara or any of those places that people do visit when they're on their tours here in
Yeah,
Ireland.
that's
Um,
awesome.
but the other band that I won't talk too much about it, but the other band that I'm very involved in is the Irish Symphonic Wind Orchestra. So back
Yes.
in 2014, myself, Barbara Dowling, founded what's become essentially sort of the national wind band of sorts. We only meet 3 or 4 times a year,
Hmm.
but it's made up of band musicians from around the country that come together. And maybe they don't get to play music at the very highest level in their community band. Sometimes maybe
Hmm.
they themselves are a very high end musician, but their band is playing
Yes.
um, uh, more grade two, grade three music.
Right. Right.
So this gives them an outlet to actually play that high level wind band repertoire that maybe they did when they were in college, or when they
Hmm.
played professionally or something.
Right.
And so that's the Irish Symphonic Wind Orchestra. We've had Johan de Mai,
Hmm.
who you mentioned earlier on. He's been over to conduct the band. We've had Philip Spark.
Hmm.
We've travelled to Wasby in Utrecht in 2017. So it's a
Hmm.
it's a really
It is.
great band, and it's
It is.
what I love about it is it's the embodiment of community band in one
Yes.
band.
Hmm.
And that comes together, and we do different things, and we
Yes.
are an ACB band, which is
Yes,
why
you
I
are.
wanted to make sure to mention it. We
Yes.
are an ACB band, one of the few
Exciting.
international groups, one of the first international groups. Let's put it that
Yes.
way,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
we will have many more, I'm sure,
Oh,
over the
yes,
coming
we
years.
will. Yeah,
So
it's a
that's the Irish
fine.
Symphonic Wind Orchestra, and
Yeah.
you see a little bit more about that at iswo.band, and you can find out
Mhm.
more about that
Yeah,
band
and they
there.
are a fine band. I've had the opportunity to hear them in rehearsals and in a performance. When we were over in January of 2020, we got the chance to see them in rehearsal and doing some performing. And they truly are like an honors band of the best musicians in many ways of Ireland. And uh, it was a thrill to see it and hear it. It was a great way for me to really know what goes on and how you grow your musicians. And I really enjoyed it. So if you get a chance, get on their website and check them out.
So, Gail, I thought maybe a good way for us to finish up the show today
Mhm.
would be to find out a little bit about each other outside of that musical world. Because if people have heard our shows before, either
Yeah,
Repertoire Happy Hour or some of
sure.
the ACB Connects, they probably know a lot of what we've talked about today.
Yeah,
They
sure.
um, but I thought maybe we would have some non-musical questions, and I've sent you a list of around 25 questions or so.
And we're gonna do them
Um,
all.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
hang on,
So
people.
so yeah. Tune in for part two. No, we thought we'd spend maybe 5-10 minutes randomly picking questions from
Yeah,
that
that'd
to
be fun.
ask each other.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind,
Okay.
do you want to ask the first question, or will I?
Okay. I will ask the first question.
Okay.
And let's see. There's so many really great ones here. Have you ever had a nickname?
I have, yeah,
Okay.
and I mentioned this on the article that I wrote for the journal recently.
Yes.
When I was in the army, I was called the waffler
Oh no.
because it was just all talk. But
The
here's
gift
why I
of
mentioned
gab.
that, because I've had plenty of nicknames over the years. But the reason I mentioned that is I get paid to talk these
Well,
days.
there you go. That's
So you
that's
know
the
what?
best part. Yeah.
I earned that name and I
You
own
did.
it,
You
and
did.
I
Yes.
am
Yes.
the waffler. Uh,
Absolutely.
so
Well, and
that was my.
I just have to say, and this is just a quick offside to this. I brought my band to Ireland before I knew you, Keith, and we were there in 2016, I think. And I say this because we were playing in this little small school, and it was lovely. And then they had these really nice afterglow thing where we had sandwiches and things, cucumber sandwiches and all this fun stuff. And this beautiful, beautiful older Irish woman came up to me, and it was after the concert, and she said, "Oh, darling, you definitely have the gift of gab." And I was thrilled because I'm very Irish, American Irish. I love my Irish heritage to I just love it. And so to get to know you, Keith, of course, was great. But I was like, this is the best compliment I've had the whole tour. It's just to have someone who's really Irish tell me that I do have the gift of gab, and I own it. You know, my initials are Gab, GAB, and I love that. But I think that's why you and I get along so well, Keith, because we can certainly gab as long as we need to.
Which is why
Okay.
we always have to. We're going to have to make sure that we make that this podcast
Yes. Not
is
3
is
hours
tight.
long.
Okay,
Good.
I'm going to ask you one now.
Okay.
What's your favorite movie?
Oh boy, that's a hard one, and I'm a Pollyanna. I mean, I might come across as a tough chick, but I think truly one of my favorite movies in the world. I got two of them, and one is a typical one, but the other one I really love Broadway. Probably my favorite movie is The Sound of Music, and I say that very
Mhm.
honestly. It's I just always love that. I like World War II history, and I like that kind of idea behind that. But the music and the beauty of it, and all the children in it, and just all that happened. I mean, you can't help but love those musicians that were so involved with that. And my other one, my other one is Legally Blonde. I love that because she wins in the end, and and she's smart, even though she's a typical American blonde Barbie doll. She's so those are the two I would say. Yeah,
That's right.
I'm not blonde, but my daughter is, so I can
Right,
own that.
that's right.
But yeah. Okay, I'm gonna ask you another one. Okay, if you were to sing at karaoke, what would you sing? Not necessarily a
Well,
specific, but it can be anything.
this is an easy one.
Oh,
So
okay.
actually, one of my gigs that I did while I was in the army was that I was the singer in a swing band.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, yeah. So Midnight Swing was the name of the band,
Okay.
and I was the singer. We did lots of Michael Bublé and Frank Sinatra
I could see you
music.
doing that.
And so,
Cool.
because I mentioned earlier on, my nana was a singer
Right.
with jazz
Right.
bands, and so that's
Yeah.
actually, I didn't mention it earlier, but that's really what got me started, was singing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've always had a love of that. If I'm at a karaoke bar, I've probably had a few drinks, which means I
Yep.
won't remember many of the words to
That's
songs, but
right.
one song I will remember the words to always is "Mac the Knife." That's nearly
That's a great song.
always that's nearly always my karaoke song of choice.
I love that. I love that. I think I've done karaoke one time, and I did a Broadway tune. And when I was in high school, I was in South Pacific. So only song I sang was "Gonna Wash That Man Right Out of My Hair." So that was the one I did. Very broad. I mean, very much like that. So that's really funny. Oh, these are fun.
Okay. What's your favorite fast food, Gail?
um,
You
I
brought me to one in Michigan. Was it Culver's, or
oh, Culver's, yeah. Oh,
that
Culver's,
was
yeah.
really good. I'd never had that before. I
You
had
had
never seen
Yeah.
it.
Of
Yeah, it
course,
was really good.
they have not what it's not ice cream. There's a lot of butter in it, and so the ice cream is really delicious. But there's even a better one than that over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, besides Culver's, and they have even more yummy ice cream of anybody. But my favorite, it kind of goes comes and goes, but I would say one of my favorite fast foods, I'll just have to be honest, is just a good hamburger, like a McDonald's hamburger,
Mm.
a Big Mac or something like that. Um, and I also really have to admit, I like Taco Bell, which anybody, anybody that likes, real Mexican food, they would just like probably, be ill when I
we,
said
we
that.
don't
But
we don't have Taco Bell here.
oh, you don't, so it's probably
No,
just as
no. So,
well.
anytime I get over there, it's like I want to try a Taco Bar. I can't get it anywhere else.
Yes,
So.
exactly. I know. I think it's just my age. I can remember growing up in a town that we didn't even have any of those. I mean, we had a Dairy Queen, and that was it, just for ice cream. There was no fast food at all. So it was a big deal to go to a McDonald's when I was a kid, that kind of thing. All right. These are so fun. Oh my gosh.
Let's do one or two more. Let's do one
Okay,
or two
okay,
more.
okay. All right. Shall we get a little more serious? Okay, if money wasn't an object, what would you do all day if you didn't have to worry
Oh
about money?
well. I mean, band would probably be a big part of it.
Mhm.
Because band isn't my career. I've very made very little money out of band over the years.
That's
Anyway,
really sad because you
uh,
really like it.
I do. So band would probably be a big part of it, but um, I think I would. I have a passion for video games.
Oh, you
Like
do?
beyond just like sitting there passively playing them. I have a passion for video games. So I
Mhm.
don't know, I'd want to be involved in like maybe helping to produce one or
Oh.
write for video games or write about video games or make
Mhm.
documentaries about video
Oh
games
my
or
goodness.
I genuinely see it as being one of the emerging great art forms that very few people are sleeping on right now at the moment. And
Mhm.
I've played some amazing games that have spoken to me far more than many other types of art has spoken to me personally.
Wow.
So I don't think I'd sit there passively because it's not in my nature to passively enjoy anything.
Mhm.
But I would certainly be involved in something around video games if
Mhm.
money wasn't an option.
I see. Yeah.
Wasn't a problem. So there you go. Yeah,
Wow. Well,
video games.
I'll tell you what. I think the only video games I ever played. I'm not kidding. I mean, we're so different that way. That's really interesting. It's like Frogger. I used to get run over all the time, and Miss Pac-Man. And that's the extent of mine. Of course, I'm quite a bit older than you are, but I, it's a wonderful thing. I know if I got into it, I would go crazy with it probably. So maybe that's why I don't. But yeah,
But there's amazing storytelling happening in that art form right now at
I'm
the moment,
sure.
and because there's that interaction, it makes you interact and think about the themes and the story in a
Sure.
very different way.
Sure.
And it's been fantastic to bring my kids into that world and guide
Mhm.
them as to sort of
Very
the
cool.
type of games that are out there and what it's not all
Yeah.
just brain candy. It's a lot of it's
No.
actually really
Well,
good introspective stuff.
listening to you talk, it almost sounds like composers of the time of, the great Russian composers and things like, the greatest composers. They wrote a lot of that to do what you just said because there's all the thematic things, the stories that were told with the Firebird Suite and any of that. It's kind of the same thing. It's just in our century, and you can do it with something that you can see and play with. I think in many ways that's probably the way their brains worked back then too. This is a way to play and have fun and think about what could be in this story. So it's
Yeah, and then just like the other musical connection with video
Mhm.
games is the actual music that's in the video games. The scores that
Exactly.
are in music
Yes.
games
Yes.
are like we mentioned Emer Noon earlier on, who sort of made
Mhm.
a career out of
Right.
composing for
Right.
World of Warcraft, and she
Right.
conducts around the world these concerts called Video
Mhm.
Games Live, where she's the conductor and she gets dressed up into the cosplay
Yes.
video game outfits and she conducts the
Uh-huh.
orchestras and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
amazing music. I mean, if you're maybe video games aren't going to be your thing, but if music is your thing, uh, don't sleep on some of the great scores that are being
Oh, I'm
written right
sure.
now at the moment for
Yeah.
video games. There's some amazing
Absolutely.
stuff out there.
Well, didn't she
So
conduct for the Oscars? Didn't she get to be the
she
first
did,
conductor on the Oscars? I
yeah,
I
and she wore
videotaped
that
it all.
that beautiful
Fabulous.
gold
Oh,
outfit. Again, she wears these
fabulous.
very sort of almost like the Met Gala
Yeah,
style sort of
sure.
outfits that she
Wonder
wears, and
Womanish.
she had
Yeah.
one made for especially for that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very,
Okay.
very cool.
We're doing more serious ones, so here's a serious one for you.
Uh-oh.
Who is your hero?
Uh, that's a good one. Uh, my real heroes are real people in my real life. Uh, I would say truly some of my heroes professionally have been my band directors. My high school band director, the one that I thought was an old man, and when he retired, he was 50, and I laugh at that now, but he just seems so old at the time, and he's gone now. But it was really I found myself teaching very much like him as I was a teacher. My college band director was definitely my hero right up until he was so old, and I wanted to visit him, and he said, "I'm not what I used to be, Gail." And I'm like, "That's okay. I just want to be around you." There's that essence of energy that I felt very strongly with. My father was definitely one of my big heroes, and a hero that I is younger than me is my daughter, and I say that very sincerely because she's in a whole different vein of life than me. She's in the health world. She's going to be a PA and physician's assistant, and but her strength in hanging in there and doing what she does, I don't think that I have a hero that's out in the other world, the big world, because I'm very family oriented, and those are the people I draw a lot of my energy and strength from. So those are my heroes, really. The other people, they have their own heroes, and I look towards them, but the ones that have guided me have been those people for sure. Yeah. What about you? I'm going to ask you the same question real quick.
Who? My son. And
Yeah.
I have a son and a daughter. My son is 10 and my daughter is 8.
Hmm.
But I'm going to say my son, Ryan, is on the autism spectrum.
Hmm.
And he has managed that so incredibly well
Hmm.
that at this stage, um, I kind of joke that he seems to have all the benefits and very few of
Yeah.
the drawbacks.
Good. Good.
Um, you
Yeah.
know,
Well.
and so just watching him grow,
Hmm.
like you mentioned your daughter,
Hmm.
watching him grow has been just a real eye opener
Hmm.
for me, and has
Hmm.
changed the way I just think about people and the way I
Hmm.
empathize with people. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so, yeah, my 10-year-old son.
Well, it's true. It is because you go, "Wow, if I could do that." But I have to tell you because I am a teacher and I am a little bit older, well, a lot older than you. But a lot of it has to do with the great parenting. That's the reason he is where he's going is because of how you've guided him and
What's your favorite sport?
ooh,
There's
well,
one for musicians. What's your favorite
yeah,
sport?
my favorite sport. My favorite sport to watch, and I'll do my favorite sport to do. Okay, so I'll give you two here. My favorite sport to watch, there's a lot of them. I really do enjoy watching American football. There's something about that that's very strategic and it's fun to watch. I enjoy watching professional basketball as well. I played basketball in high school, believe it or not, being 5'1". But my favorite to do is swimming. I've become a competitive swimmer thanks to a coach that I found who's helping us out, who is now involved with ACB as well. And Mary Kate has helped me focus. I've always swum for health, but I never was a trained swimmer at all. Like I know your children are, Keith. Your kids are taking swimming. My daughter was a really great high school swimmer, state level. And so I became a mom of a swimmer, which, you do all this stuff with your kids and I would go and get her there at 5:45 every morning that she had to be there, and there'd be a lane open, so I would just swim for the health of it, is what I said. But one of my goals when I retired was to compete in what's called the U.S. Masters, and it is a kind of like community bands. It's like community swimming in a lot of ways, and so I'd gotten the magazine for years and started looking at understanding things, and so I retired in 19, and in 20 hired Mary Kate to help me, and I've done one competition already in this past June, and on this Sunday I have my second one over in Milwaukee. So was I more afraid to dive into that water than go on Carnegie stage? Yes. Yes, I was. That was a challenge for me to put myself out there and try. I'm not built like a swimmer at all. I'm a very small gymnast style body, but swimming I have really enjoyed. It's a challenge. It's very much like music. It's little tiny things that you're trying to fix and to do better and to get understand how to do a turn differently or whatever, or move your hand a certain way. Same thing as in music. When you teach privately, teach lessons, it's that same little small motor skills. And so I have enjoyed it greatly. I'm nervous about Sunday. I just want to beat myself, and that's a hard thing. But
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, I think you're going to do fantastic, and I know all the
yeah,
training that you've been doing, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Part of it's
Well, best
keeping in
best of
shape.
luck with that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I'll let you know. If you don't hear from me, you'll know why.
If there's no episode 2, we
Yeah,
we understand. We understand
Gail didn't do well on her swimming. Yeah, yeah.
why.
Okay, so let's see.
Well,
Go ahead. Do I get to do one more or not?
yes, okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's see. I have my little sheet here. If you hear me flipping it around. I wanted to ask you this one. What celebrity would you like to have a drink with?
Ooh, that's a really good question, and I
Hmm.
wrote these questions.
You did. You did. Yes.
I
Yes.
should have had I should have had an answer for
You
that.
should have had answers.
Um, it would definitely be Stephen Fry. I don't know whether you know who Stephen Fry
Oh, yeah.
is,
I know who he
but
is.
he's a
Yeah.
British comedian at first, but he's a
Okay.
writer, a philosopher,
Ah.
a host.
Wow.
Just the most amazing person. What made me think of him there was
Stephen Fry.
he's just capable of speaking as an expert on nearly any topic
Oh my
that you put
goodness.
in front of him. He's amazing. He's a huge advocate and fan of one of my favorite authors, which is
Hmm.
Oscar Wilde, the
Oh,
great
sure.
Irish writer.
Yes.
He's played him in movies. He's read a lot of his
Ah.
audiobooks. If you've ever listened to the Harry Potter audiobooks, it's Stephen Fry that
Oh, it
reads all
is.
of those.
Right.
The most
Okay.
amazing voice, just an absolute treasure of a human being.
Oh, that's
And so
fantastic.
absolutely will be Stephen
Uh,
Fry.
that's a great answer. I have to look him up and listen a little bit more to him. But isn't it fun when you find somebody like that? Yeah, absolutely.
So I think this has been a really good first
It's
episode,
been
Gail.
fun. Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
really happy with this, and we will. I think this section of the podcast has to stay. I think we'll have to ask a lot of our guests some of these non-musical
Hmm.
questions and get
I
to
think
know them
so too.
outside of the band
Hmm.
room.
Hmm.
How can people find out more about ACB before I let them know how they can actually find out more
Okay.
about the podcast?
Okay. Thank you. Um, the best thing to do, I think, is to go to the website, and it's really easy. It's AC and then the word bands, BANDS, at and then .com and it or .org, excuse me. So it's acbands.org, and I would get on the website and just kind of look it around and things like that. I am a person who loves obviously to talk to other people, so you can always get a hold of me through that, or you can get a hold of me as the president if you just want to find out more about ACB. And it's worldwide. So if you are listening in other countries, we'd love to hear from you for sure. So that's how I would suggest it.
And if you've enjoyed the podcast and you want to help spread the word, you can make sure, first of all, that you subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast app that you use of your choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, wherever it is that you want to listen to this podcast. Make sure that you subscribe after today's episode. And then if you want to help us share the news, you can leave us a review on your podcast catcher. If that's an Apple Podcasts, even better, because that really helps us. And
Mhm.
then you can also share it onto your social media as well, be it Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook as well. And we are on all of those platforms. You can just search Association of Concert Bands. It's a slightly different handle on each one, but you will find us if you search Association of Concert Bands. And that's where we are on Facebook and Instagram. Twitter's a little bit different. It's ASSN Concert Band. That's our Twitter handle, and you'll be able to find us there. And a big thank you to Mary Kate, who's one of the producers in this show. We didn't hear much about today, but is doing a lot of the background work for this show and a lot of the marketing and setting up some of those social media handles too. So thank you very much,
Absolutely.
Mary Kate, as well.
Yes.
So until next time, it's a band thing.
It
And
is.
we'll see you soon.
That's right. Thanks so much.